Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Career and Professional Development Center's Career Fair Prep Workshop. We're so appreciative that so many of you have shown up today. I'm Rachel Rosenfeld. I'm one of the career consultants in the CPDC, and I'm hosting this workshop today with two of my colleagues who will introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Flanagan. I am one of the career consultants for Dietrich College, as well as the consultant for the School of Drama.
Hi, everyone. Glad to see you all here. I'm Beth Jameson. I am also a career consultant working with Dietrich College.
All right, next slide. Okay, in the agenda today, first, we'll take a look at what career fairs are coming up. We'll let you know what to expect at in-person fairs. We'll talk about what to expect for virtual fairs. We'll discuss what you'll want to do before, during, and after a fair. And we will have Q&A at the end, but we welcome you throughout this workshop to put questions in the chat. Beth is going to be monitoring the chat, so please do that at any time. She'll respond as quickly as possible, and we might jump in sometimes as well. We do request that you stay muted. All right, next slide. 3 of the CPDC's biggest fairs are coming up within a month. Jumpstart, Encompass, which has both an in-person and a virtual day, and the Creative Arts Fair. Registration for Jumpstart and Encompass are open now, and registration for the Creative Arts Fair in mid-February will open up 2 weeks before the fair. You can see other a list of other fairs as well, and those will take place throughout the spring semester, and you can go on to Handshake to find more details about those. I do want to make a note about the Creative Arts Fair, because so many CFA students registered today, that the Creative Arts Fair, which is part of the Creative Arts Opportunity Conference, is mid-February. Caden Boucher, the career consultant for CFA Art, Architecture, and Design, will be holding their own career fair prep workshop in early February. So please check Handshake for those 2 career fair prep events for that event. Okay, next slide. Before I get into more detail on what to expect at an in-person fair, I just thought it would be helpful for you to understand the goals of going to a career fair. It may come as a surprise that the main goal of a career fair is not necessarily to find an internship or job right there, right? Of course, you're hoping that it can lead to that, and it certainly can. A fair can lead to getting an internship or job, but there are other really important goals. So you are going to learn about companies and their positions beyond the research you did to prepare for the fair. You are going to introduce yourself to contacts at companies that you're interested in, and that's going to help you build a network. You'll practice talking about yourself and your skills and experiences. And you can find out what competencies the employers are looking for and what you can do to make yourself the most attractive candidate. And keep in mind, for those of you who are first and second year students, you may talk to employers who are only hiring rising juniors, but it's still valuable for you to be there because they can help you prepare for applying later. Having information about what they are looking for in candidates, and also the name of that contact, that recruiter or that alumnus to follow up with later, is very valuable. So next slide, please. So it's the day of the fair. What should you expect? The first thing to expect is lines. So you have to line up outside of the Wiegand gym. And as we let you in, you will swipe your ID card. And we do limit the amount of students who can enter at any one time. So there may be times when you're stopping in the line to wait for people to come out. You can see from this aerial shot that this is one of our Encompass fairs, that there are also lines at the employer booths. Not all of them, but the more popular employers, there are going to be lines there too. I'm not saying this to turn you off at all. They're just want you to know what to expect. And there's actually a lot of excitement the day of a career fair. And, we're really excited about you getting to interact with employers. And also there's swag. Most of the employers do bring swag, so that's always fun. But don't let crowds intimidate you, because, next slide, please, you will get the opportunity to talk to an employer one-on-one. As you can see here, the student has resumes, the employer is looking at the resume, they're having a chat, right? So you will get that opportunity. So I did want to make a note about shaking hands, right? The protocol for shaking hands changed during the pandemic, as we all know, and now it can be kind of confusing. What we recommend when you walk up to the employer, just, a smile, a friendly hello is good. You do not have to reach out your hand to shake someone. You can follow the employer's lead on that. Keep in mind, if you're uncomfortable shaking hands, you can bring hand sanitizer to use after, or if it makes you more comfortable, you can say that you're bumping elbows. Whatever makes you comfortable is good. Also, a note about masks. Some students and employers will be wearing them, some will not. We encourage you to do whatever you are comfortable with. So it's absolutely okay to wear a mask. Just be sure, if you do, to really speak up. Even if you aren't wearing a mask, the noise level gets really high in the gym. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Jumpstart. Jumpstart is our networking event specifically for first and second year students. Taking place, as you can see here, Monday, January 30th, 5 to 8 p.m. in the gym. Last time I checked, 24 employers had registered, but you can check back in Handshake to see that could go up. What can you do there? You can talk to employers to find out about their companies, any internships they might have, and what they are looking for in candidates. This is a great time to just be able to ask employers questions. Please note, for all of our in-person fairs, entry to the fair is going to close 30 minutes before the end of the fair. That means that for Jumpstart, you're not going to be able to gain admittance after 7:30. I did want to note, if you are a student who would like disability accommodations for the event, to reach out to the Office of Disability Resources at access@andrew.cmu.edu. This information is also on the fair event page. You'll want to do that at least 1 week in advance of the session. And next slide, please. The Encompass in-person fair. This is our fair for all majors. As you can see, there's an in-person day and a virtual day. The in-person fair will be also in the weekend gym, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I checked just yesterday, there were 48 employers. That could go up. Please note, we have broken this into 2 sessions. One for if you're searching for an internship from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. For any seniors like looking for positions after graduation from 1 to 4. We would like you to try to follow that schedule, but if you have class conflicts during the internship session and you can only come, in the full-time positions, that's totally fine. And just keep in mind that you're going to want to manage your time well. That's really important for an in-person fair. Given that you have to wait in lines for some employers, you want to have a strategy for which companies you're going to visit. And you can see the employers that are coming in Handshake. We do recommend not going to all name brand employers that might have long lines, to cast the net wider, not just because of lines, but just because, a lot of times students think of the same small number of companies, but there are a lot of other great companies out there that you may not have heard of before. So give those a chance as well. Okay.
All right, now that you got a little taste of the in-person experience, we're gonna jump over to the virtual fair experience. And some of you have already experienced this in the last couple of years on Handshake. So all of our virtual fairs this spring will be through our Handshake platform. It'll look a little something like what you're seeing up on the screen here. If you have had the opportunity, obviously you're on Zoom right now. So it's very, very similar in terms of the video audio capabilities, as well as chatting with the employer. Maybe adding email address or contact info on the side. So main things to be aware of is that the employers will offer 2 different session types for the virtual fairs. And that could look like a one-on-one session where you are the only person meeting with that employer for that whole 10 minutes. That time is yours. You don't have to share with anyone else. So it's a little bit different than, waiting in line and having a couple minutes to talk at an in-person fair. Then employers can also offer group sessions. So these are 30-minute max sessions with typically 50 students in those particular sessions. So they limit that to just being able to communicate and ask questions in the chat. So keep that in mind as well. But it is an opportunity more so, and I'll add this up on the screen here for y'all. It's more so that it's an understanding of who they are and what they do. More of an info session, but you still can ask about different opportunities, maybe about their interviewing process, whatever you wish to ask during that time. So strategy wise, you might think if you're a first year student, for example, and maybe you're not looking for internships or full-time opportunities yet, maybe a group session might be helpful just to know what's out there in the first place. One-on-one sessions, if you're definitely looking for a specific opportunity with a specific employer, or maybe you're hoping for that full-time opportunity as well, one-on-ones can definitely be the most helpful. So we generally advise to fill your schedule with those one-on-one sessions, but do keep in mind fellow students are also looking for those one-on-one sessions. So please do not schedule more than one-on-one session with the same employer. We mentioned that registration opens 2 weeks prior for those events. So unlike the in-person fair, you don't have to schedule at the in-person fair, you don't have to schedule a one-on-one session anymore, but for these virtual ones, you still need to do that. So even if you've registered for the fair, that doesn't mean that you have picked a slot or an employer to talk to. So please keep that in mind. So we wanted to make sure you know where to find these opportunities on Handshake to actually be able to register. Handshake has moved some things around, so just keep that in mind. On the events page, it'll look slightly different than probably what you saw for the fall fairs. So if you log into cmu.joinhandshake.com, which hopefully y'all did to get on here today, you can click on the events tab, which is in the upper left-hand corner. Once you get to that events page, there will be a couple filters that you can utilize to make sure that you're finding our specific fairs. So clicking that category button, make sure you check just the box for career fair. That will give you, multiple results. And then the secondary piece we'll make sure you utilize is actually right here. So under more filters, click the box that says events posted by my school. You'll know which ones are posted by us because you'll see that little CMU logo in the bottom right-hand corner for those particular fairs. So that's just an easy way to know what's ours. There are other fairs that are out there on Handshake, but we're talking specifically about these ones for today. All right. So when you do click on one of those events, you'll see a description of what that entails. Please read that multiple times. Every fair is a little bit different. You've seen that even just by what Rachel has already shared. So knowing if you're interested in internships versus full-time opportunities for Encompass, for example, is something you can read in that description. When you get on this particular page, you'll know that you registered for the event as a whole. Once you go to this join event button on the right-hand side and then click join event, some of the particular fairs will ask questions as to like, what time do you think you might be attending this particular event? So answer the questions and then it'll turn green and it'll say registered when you've officially registered for the in-person or virtual fairs. As I mentioned, for the virtual fairs, registration is part 1. Part 2 is actually scheduling various sessions. So you will need to do both to actually make sure that you are being active in the fair. And you can actually do that up to a minute before the session starts for a virtual fair. Like I just said, if there are multiple day sessions, like for example, we have a virtual and in-person version of our Encompass Fair. So there will be 2 separate registrations for that. So if you're interested in both, by all means, register for both. There might be different employers on those different days. So definitely take a look at who's coming, and then you can register accordingly. Register first and then sign up for those sessions for the virtual fairs. And there might be more that get added over time. So if a representative from a particular company sees like, oh, all my sessions are full, then they might add a little bit more. So if there's someone you really want to talk to, general advice is sign up as soon as registration opens, which typically is 2 weeks beforehand. All right, next piece of this for the virtual fairs is some of the handshake nuances that you need to know. So what can be most helpful for employers to know about you is having your profile up to date, as well as updating your resume, which you can upload right onto your profile and it can fill in the profile for you. So kind of a win-win there. Make sure that's set to visible. Update your profile and set it to the community. So this is under the settings option. So basically the community setting is intended so that employers can look at your profile and you can message them back and forth. Test your video and audio. I feel like after a couple years, we probably don't need to say this, but I'm still going to say it anyway. So make sure, especially if you're in a new space, maybe a different dorm space, maybe you're somewhere on campus, test that video and audio even before 5 minutes beforehand so that you're not freaking out last minute or anything like that. I generally recommend Chrome. Please do not use Safari. Please do not use the Handshake app. They will not work properly. So Chrome is your best bet there. Firefox can work generally too. And some employers, just keep in mind, some employers might send a link ahead of time, but usually it's built into Handshake where there will be a button that pops up much like today, where it'll say five minutes beforehand or a couple minutes beforehand, you can join this and test it out, and then it will let you in. Make sure your lighting, your background, your attire is appropriate, much like your attire needs to be appropriate for in-person events. And then I see Beth put in the chat the Handshake video requirements. So again, just another way to double check that everything's working the way it should. All right, expectations for virtual fairs. So if you sign up for a session, it is expected that you do in fact attend that session. If you can't make it, there is a cancel button, but I would do that sooner rather than later because you want to make sure that other students have the opportunity to grab that session as well. Think of it like if you were to have a virtual interview at one of these companies, you don't want to just ghost them and not share that you're not able to attend, because that leaves a bad light on you and can ruin reputations for not just you in that company, but other students from CMU with that company. So keeping all of that in mind, we do have a policy that I see Beth has also put in the chat. Main thing is just be respectful of employers and their time, and they would be respectful of your time as well. All right. So that's the Handshake portion. And again, feel free to add questions to the chat, especially if you're not familiar with Handshake. You can always schedule an appointment with your career consultant to make sure that everything's kind of up to date if you need that quick check. All right. So now that you kind of get a sense of the in-person and virtual pieces of the fair, I want to talk about actually preparing for the event. Maybe in the little reactions part, how many of you, like, is this your first time going to a career fair? I'm just curious. See a couple hands there. All right, a lot of hands there. So awesome. You know, it can be a really exciting time. It can be also a nerve-wracking time, and we totally get that. And that's why we do these prep sessions, but also know that, you know, all the career consultants and the CPDC team will be available for you during those fairs as well, before, during, and after. But to feel more confident, you want to make sure that you're being as prepped as possible. So first things to think about: consider your priorities for attending the fair and know your goals. This kind of reflects what Rachel said earlier. You know, are you looking for a job or an internship? Are you just trying to learn more and get some facts about a company? Are you going in to network and just get to know people for later on? Or maybe you're an undeclared student and you want to use it as an opportunity to explore and see what's out there. So whatever your priorities are great, but make sure that you are framing your questions and doing your research as it pertains to your priorities and your goals. So if your goals relate towards knowing a specific company or learning about a particular role, or maybe it's just to practice networking, so when you are looking for an internship in the future, you'll feel more comfortable doing it. You know, again, just know that going in, and that can help direct your preparation, your conversations, and that follow-up. So to better prepare, as we were saying, you might have an employer in mind, but if you don't, make sure that you're taking a look at the list of employers, and that's on every Handshake fair, whether it's virtual or in person. You will be able to see who's attending. Rachel mentioned earlier that the big companies might be swamped if it's an in-person fair, or their slots might be taken in a virtual space pretty quickly. So a lesser known company could have great opportunities as well that are doing the same thing that some of those bigger companies are offering. So it might be nice if you can explore maybe some small companies, large companies, and mid-sized companies to see, like, what is the best fit for you. Sometimes people go in with certain expectations, but it can be helpful to take a step back and see what else is there. Also, think about the research side in terms of the organization, what they do, what are their values, what are their mission, what do they sell if it's a product, for example. So knowing all that ahead of time is important, because the last thing that you want to do is walk up to a table, know nothing about them, and be like, hi, I'm looking for an internship. What can you do? That's a big no-no. So instead, the research can be helpful, and you can have notes, whether that's notes for the in-person that you have nearby with you, or if it's virtual, you can type up notes, write notes nearby. That's perfectly fine. So you can have that research that you did nearby to help inform your questions. Sites like the company site itself, social media that they run, Glassdoor, other news stories, those can all be helpful in learning more about the company and can be a good conversation starter as well. So, and then lastly, think about any positions that could be of interest to you. Sometimes there are titles out there that you might not be sure what it is. So again, doing that research ahead of time can be super helpful. All right, next piece of prepping is identifying your skills, whether that's in person or virtual. Yet again, know from your past experiences what you've worked on, what you have developed over time skill wise, and that can help lead into that introduction, whether that's called a professional introduction or an elevator pitch. You want to have something kind of ready to go when you are meeting with an employer for the first time, rather than, like I said, just walking up and saying, hey, can I have a job? So this is an opportunity for you to share the skills that maybe they're looking for in a specific position, and sharing how you've done that. Beth has dropped in the chat one of our resources for creating that pitch. We won't go over that necessarily today, but we want to make sure that you have some things available. You can also practice this with friends, with faculty, and of course with us. So mainly we want to make sure that you have some pieces in mind so that you feel comfortable in having a conversation. And really that's what it should be, a conversation, not let me blurt out everything that I've ever done and then leave it at that. You want to kind of lead into some things that you have worked on. And of course, say hello, ask how they're doing. Make it as human and natural as possible, because yeah, you might be nervous. They might recognize that as well, and that's perfectly okay. So just keep that in mind, because you can ask a question at the end of your introduction, which can lead into that conversation. All right. So the next piece of that is the questions that they could ask you. So yes, you lead in, you ask them a little bit, but they might also guide the conversation themselves. So if you have done your research, and we hope that you did, you would be able to answer questions like, why are you interested in this company? Or tell me a little bit about yourself, which essentially is that professional introduction. Having a list of questions to ask the employer can also be helpful beyond just the introductory one to kind of get you going, but enough that you would be confident in applying for something at that organization or company. And make it a little bit more of a conversation, as I mentioned. I see in the chat what kinds of questions should we ask them. So really that's going to depend on each individual employer and each individual position that they might be recruiting for at that time. So I like to say, think about your values first and foremost. So if there is something that's really important to you that you would need to have in an internship or a job, then that can kind of guide your questions. So maybe it's flexibility in terms of like a hybrid environment, for example, something that is important to you that can kind of guide your questions. Or it's questions that help fill in the gaps that maybe it wasn't mentioned in the job description and you need to be more informed or just better understand before you can apply. Or if it's after you applied, follow-up questions based on the things that you read about. So again, it can vary from company to company, and maybe Rachel or Beth, if you want to throw in additional thoughts to that, feel free.
Yeah, I want to throw in, because I saw another question in the chat. If your main goal is to search for an internship, should you come out and ask for that? The link that Beth provided for how to prepare your 30-minute introduction, the end of your introduction is a great time to ask a question. So maybe you've researched this employer and they don't have any internships posted on Handshake yet or on their company website. And at the end of your introduction, and say, I'm really interested in internships. Will you be, hosting any this summer? And, when will those be available? Like, if you did see an internship already, you could mention that at the end. I've already, either I've already applied to, or I'm interested in such and such internship. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? So.
Right, absolutely. So again, another great way to show that you've done your research by the fact that you've looked up what roles they have available or not available, what could be available in the future.
And I did want to say one more thing about the question, what kinds of questions you can also ask, about let's say you're a first-year student and you look at the internship and the internship they have posted and you're like, I don't quite meet these requirements yet. You can ask them, what can I do to prepare for trying to get an internship like this next summer? So there's a range of questions you can ask.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Lastly, just to reflect something Rachel said earlier too, time management is definitely important, especially like on the virtual side, you only have 10 minutes if it's a one-on-one. If it's in person, it might be less. It probably will be less than 10 minutes. So just keep in mind that, you know, there might be a line of people behind you, so you can kind of hone in on what you want to know during that time and be specific. I'm going to pass this back over to Rachel.
And I'm going to unmute. Great. All right. So it's the day of the fair. First, we want to talk about how you dress. And we chose carefully our word for this: dress for confidence, right? We always see a real range of attire at the fairs. Be a little mindful of what industry you're looking for a position in, and that might affect the way you dress. We see students who wear suits. You certainly do not have to wear a suit. It's what you feel comfortable, what you feel good in. You can wear business casual. Some students wear, you know, like you said, dress pants and a nice shirt. I see students who look perfectly great in nice jeans with nice shoes and a nice shirt. Like there's really, you know, a range just for you to feel confident. And that's virtually as well. You definitely want to dress for confidence in a virtual fair as well. Yeah, put your phone on do not disturb. That's pretty obvious. Have your ID card for in-person fairs because you need that to get in. Having a notepad is a really good idea. And it's great to have like a folder in a notepad. You know, if you've done research on 5 different employers, you may want to just, before you step up, check your notes so you can refer to them, and then to take notes after the conversation. You don't want to be taking notes while you're talking to them because you're not going to be like in the moment with the employer, but as you walk away, you can jot down some notes. And also, you know, having a folder will allow you to, you know, carry things like will carry their promotional materials and business cards, but also for in person to have your resume. Virtual fairs the day of, make sure your camera background, as it says here, you know, you want it to be, you don't want anything cluttered in the background, have a nice virtual background or blur it, and really set yourself up somewhere where you're not going to be interrupted or have distractions. Okay, next. Okay, so during the career fair, this is reiterating what Katie said before. You want to be conversational, just come up and say hi, do your self-introduction, be ready to answer their questions, and you know, wrap up the conversation based on your priorities and goals. So if you've already applied or you're going to apply, for example, ask about that process. In terms of getting their contact info, in general, you want to ask about the best ways to stay connected. It's totally fine to ask for their contact information. And did want to mention that if you're on a virtual one-on-one with an employer, if you get disconnected, you can message the employer via Handshake. All right, next. Career fair after. All right, so it doesn't just end there. It's a really good idea to email thank you notes to anyone that you talk to. You can connect on LinkedIn with the recruiter or alum that you might have spoken to. We really recommend tracking your conversations. You can have a spreadsheet, a Google Doc, and just so you can keep track of where you are with everyone. You can apply to any relevant jobs or internships that you learned about there or that you already knew about but just wanted to wait to talk to the company for a little bit. You'll want to look out if you really liked an employer. Keep an eye on Handshake, sign up for any information sessions or events that they have. Really after you've made contact with someone at a career fair, you really want to keep an eye on your email or Handshake if you're messaged through there in case an employer contacts you after a fair. And then of course you would prepare for interviews. You can talk to your career consultant about that. You all were invited into career launch modules. There's an interviewing module there. You can always reach out to your through a conversation through email or make an appointment to ask about any of these follow-up items. And really just keep yourself engaged in the process. Follow up with people, keep looking, keep practicing, you know, your introduction and your interviewing and planning. So to just set the, you know, some time aside for it every week. That's really helpful. And finally, next slide, our resource page. These are all resources that can help you: virtual career fair prep tip sheet and Handshake articles on best practices. And also, as I just mentioned, remember that Career Launch just has a lot of information, whether it's preparing for a career fair or any other part of you know, the career process for searching for an internship or job. And Beth is putting those links in the chat. And that brings us to our Q&A portion. So we invite you to write any questions that you have into the chat, and we will address those. If there's anything you don't feel like we covered or you want was confusing to you, you know, please let us know. Yes, we do recommend for the fair to have, like, you know, 10 to 15 copies of your resume in a folder. I mean, it also depends if you already know how many employers, but you know, you may end up seeing another employer that interests you that you want to go to. So I would say, you know, 10 to 15, good idea.
Yeah, and I'll just add, if you're attending like the creative arts fair and you might be asked to share like a website or portfolio, sometimes having it like as a QR code on your resume could be helpful. Or if you have like an iPad where you can show slides of that's also another option. One question I got was about interviews after the fair, and so yes, there could be the potential that an employer directly from the fair could invite you. As Rachel said, like having an eye on your email is definitely important for that. So just keep that in mind, that the conversation could definitely still continue. And even if there isn't an interview right after, not every company does that. So don't feel like you missed out by any means.
Okay, there's a question. Sorry if I missed it, but what should we include in the thank you note? Do I send it to everyone I talk to? I would definitely follow up with anyone that, you know, you're interested in that company, and just say, you know, it was really nice to meet you during the fair. You can reference something that you learned. If you could reiterate, you know, I've already applied, or I'm applying, you know, and would love the opportunity. I mean, I think you can say, would love the opportunity to talk about this further. I don't know, Katie or Beth, if you want to add anything.
Nope.
Okay. We have a lot of questions here, so let's see.
So is there anything else we should bring with us besides notepad, folder, resume? I mean, those are the main things. Like if you happen to have like your own business card, that would be cool, but that's not a requirement by any means. But definitely have physical copies of anything like a resume that you wish to share. Plus, you don't want to be bogged down by like carrying all this stuff around with you. Just the essentials are fine. There will typically be a coat room available for putting everything else aside, so you're not just like trying to juggle your coat on one arm and everything else in the other arm. So
yeah, there's going to be a room to check backpacks. We usually don't let backpacks into the gym. So yeah, really, notepad, folder. You'll want to, when you check your bag, they'll remind you up there, you're going to want to take your ID card out so you can get in. But yeah, notepad folder, resumes, that's it. Okay, what other questions?
For the question about for the slide/QR code, what would be an example of something we would show with it? So like I said, that's more specifically, let's say if you're interested in architecture or design, then you might have like your portfolio or a website to show someone. So that's a very like niche thing. And as Rachel said, there will be some prep sessions specifically for the Creative Arts Fair that'll be coming up.
Great. Okay, what else?
There was a question about how to structure the 10 minutes with the employer. So assuming this is the virtual fair, and how much time to spend on the self-introduction. So, I mean, the 10 minutes, you can make it whatever you want to make it. But the self-introduction, I would say usually around like 1 to 2 minutes. It's not intended to be like, let me tell my whole life story or anything like that. Usually more of like who you are, what you're interested in, what you bring to the table, skill wise can be good things to hit on within that time. Again, there's a handout for that. But how to structure the rest of the time, I think it'll just depend on the flow and the back and forth between you and that particular representative. So, you know, if they're asking you questions, make sure that you still have some time at the end to ask your questions and vice versa. But sometimes you find that time goes by pretty quickly. So you can always do a follow-up chat if you felt like you needed to ask more. But just make sure that you're kind of keeping an eye on the clock. And usually there's like a reminder that says how much time is left, like a minute left in the session.
You're missing it.
Katie, there's a question about the prep sessions for CFA. Did you mention that Kaden was going to be sending out that information, or is that already on Handshake?
I'm sure Kaden will be sending emails, but they also have the events posted on Handshake, and those are going to take place in early February.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and those I believe will be recorded as well. If you're unable to make it, this will be posted on our YouTube page. So if you forget anything that we said, you can go back and take a look at that. Rachel, this one's for math, for graduating seniors looking for jobs.
How common is it for job offers to remain in the fall versus the spring? Okay, so we actually someone in our department ran some data on this, and overall, most students get internships in the spring. There's this misunderstanding because you're hearing about peers that may be getting positions in the fall, that feeling like, oh my gosh, it's too late. Most students are going to get offers in the spring, and it really depends on the company. There's some companies, you know, like the big banks that recruit, like so far, they've already made all their offers in the summer and the fall, but there's so many other companies that, you know, first of all, we see them attending our fair in February who are still going to be looking for students then and throughout the spring.
Yeah, like we have a data science and analytics fair that will be virtual coming up at the end of March, and it's the end of March and they're still signing up because they want students. So just keep that in mind that, you know, it's not too late.
And smaller companies sometimes don't budget their positions till later. So yeah, it's definitely not too late. There was another question about that I saw. Is it worth going to a career fair event, even if there isn't really any employers in your field? neuroscience major who mainly wants to do research. Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. Is it normal to have internships outside of your major? Yeah, I think it's really going to depend. As a neuroscience major, and I am your career consultant, I would love for you to make an appointment and talk about this further, because just to understand your goals more, because there can be things that you don't in industry that you may not think are related, but that you are still building transferable skills that you can take to other positions. I think that you should look and see if any of the employers just sound interesting to you, and it's a way to just go and, you know, ask questions and make contacts. But I would love to explore that with you further, just to find out your goals, maybe even recommend, you know, because, you know, I have a list of the employers attending, could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I see that they noted an interest in research, and sometimes there are internships that come up in research as well. So it could be at the fair. And of course, as we continue to have more fairs later in the spring, there could be opportunities that pop up at those fairs too. Okay. Two-parter question. I'll answer the first part, and I know Rachel mentioned the second part. So, what does researching companies entail? Researching companies, we're not saying like what year were they founded or anything like that. It's more of getting a sense of what do they work on? Like what do they do? You know, not every finance related company is the same, for example. So like what do they work on? What is their mission? What are their values? We talked about news stories, for example. So like you'll get a really good sense of what things are important to them, what's happening in their work on the day-to-day basis. So some of those things you can find on the website for that company, or sometimes we mentioned earlier, like Glassdoor, you can hear from other folks who have worked there, what things they've done or what they want to share about the company that they feel is important for people to know. So that research can vary depending on like what gaps you need to fill in about that particular company for yourself. And that's why like attending info sessions, if they offer them at some point, can always be helpful, because that usually shares like the most important things they want people to know about their company. And then sites like Glassdoor, even on Handshake with some of the reviews, you can see what people say about that company that you might need to know about.
Great. And in terms of keeping a spreadsheet, you're asking what should you put down? That's a great question. So, you know, the name of the company, you'll want to write down exactly what position you applied for, maybe a link to that, you know, any contacts that you've made so far, and then keep track of like, when did you want to, like, what's a date that you last reached out to them, so you know when to follow up, like the date that you applied. So you just want to keep, it's too hard to keep it all in your head. And you could have a comments column where you like jot down some notes about it. I don't know if Katie or Beth, if you want to add anything to that.
I would just mainly say whatever you need to know to distinguish one place from another is the main addition to that.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Rachel said about dates, just making sure you're keeping track of when you heard from people, when you want to follow up, because that can then hopefully help trigger you if you're like, oh, geez, did I follow up with this person? Or, you know, when was the last time I heard from them? It just helps keep that in mind and maybe help keep it fresh for you.
Okay. And are we missing any?
I think we hit on everything. But of course, as we said before, if you do have additional questions, you can definitely reach out to your consultant and make sure that you get that answered either ahead of the fair, or some of that info might be directly on the event itself.
There's one last question here about how soon after the fair should we follow up? I mean, usually for thank yous, you can, send that right away, but it's also fine. I mean, if for some reason it took you like a week or something, it was great to meet you at the fair, that's fine as well. But, as soon as possible after.
As a freshman without research job or internship experience yet, how do you sell yourself? Yeah, coursework can definitely be a way. Maybe there was a particular project that you did in one of your classes that relates to an area of interest. You can definitely share a story or specific details about that. Maybe you're involved on campus in student organizations, and you can talk about the things that you do within that relate towards transferable skills to a job or internship. So there are definitely places you can pull that from. As a first year student, you probably did things in high school that you can bring into the conversation as well. So don't feel like if you haven't delved into things fully on campus yet, there are other external things that you can talk about as well. The question, should we follow up once? I don't know if that relates to when should follow up, but I would say don't keep knocking on doors like immediately if you're not hearing back. So be respectful of that recruiter or that employer's time, but if you applied to something and you're waiting to hear back, give it a week or two before responding.
And keep in mind that we're not the only school that's having fairs now. This is another big recruiting season, so recruiters are often like on the road, and they're very busy.
Yeah, so I guess don't be discouraged if you're not getting responses in a quick manner of time.
But really just encourage you all to actually go, even if you have that little bit of fear. Once again, one of the goals is to go and practice doing this, and you'll feel really good about it. I think you'll find the energy at the fair is great. The employers are really friendly. And it's a good way to like stretch yourself and grow. Is it helpful to talk about previous experiences, even if it isn't directly related to that company, because it could show other skills? Sure. I mean, if you, for example, if you've seen, oh, they have this internship posted, I can see what skills they're looking for. I don't have it in this industry, but I developed that skill somewhere else. Of course, you can talk about that transferable skill. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to meet 100% of the qualifications to apply for like an internship, for example. But those transferable skills can definitely be a way to get your foot in the door and kind of get started.
We can wait another minute thank you for all these wonderful questions. See if there's any other question before we wrap up.
Yeah, but just to reiterate, this is recorded, so it will be put on our YouTube page. The slides will be available. I think we're gonna upload them to the event itself and perhaps email?
I'm planning to email everyone who's, attended. I can send a link to the recording. Yeah.
Perfect.
So I guess with that, it doesn't look like there are other questions. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Oh, and there is another question. Is it rude to take notes on your phone while talking to a recruiter? I'm going to let them answer as well, but I think you should be fully focused with eye contact on the person and take your notes when you walk away. So
I would say, the more, we'll say, old-fashioned tends to be more appropriate if you're doing it then and there. If you don't have a notepad and you're gonna forget what they're saying, maybe if you ask, like, is it okay if I take some notes on my phone? Then they know what you're doing. You're not just blowing them off.
right. Yeah, that sounds great. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do this. And please follow up with us or your career consultant if you need any additional help, and have fun at the fairs. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks. Best of luck.